All right, so Civil War 2.0 is in its infancy on the Texas border with Mexico, so we are being told. This is conveniently timed to the initiation of numerous other wars that are about to flare up all at the same time around the world, as well as potentially cover up some failed foreign policy and other shady dealings. We're going to attempt to connect all the dots for you today. If you don't know what's going on, President Biden issued an ultimatum to Governor Abbott of Texas today that he needs to remove the fences, relieve the National Guards of their duties, and basically open the floodgates and allow the hordes of illegal immigrants to come in undeterred until they work out some sort of deal, which of course the Texans are pushing back along with 25 other states. Even New York is saying, okay, this is getting kind of ridiculous. We support immigration, we understand their plight, we sympathize, but this is getting out of control. Even hardline humanitarian centrists like myself understand that it's counterproductive to do what they're doing, not only from a national security standpoint, but if you are pro-immigration, what you're going to end up doing is creating hardliners that are going to push back, and it's going to make whatever you're trying to do all the more difficult in the end. So there has to be some level of moderation here. I think that this is all a contrivance. This has been concocted to get people fighting with one another conveniently. It's going to coincide with the release of the movie Civil War, but more conveniently, it covers up a lot of shady shit that's about to go down all around the world. And I'm telling you, I'm keeping an eye on things. The honest to God truth, if that's what you believe in, I'm telling you guys from the bottom of my heart that the things that are going on around the world are all about to flare up at the same time. I don't want to say I'm going to bet anything on it, but I'm telling you, man, the confidence level is seriously high. This is what is going on, and this is what this whole Civil War business, that now you have the whole Twitter X-Men brigade. I call them the X-Men. You got Ben Shapiro, you got Elon Musk, Sarah Cirillo. They're all heading down to the border now to grift and, galvanize and whip everybody into a political frenzy just in time for election season. I guess a grifter got a grift. They just came back from some PR stunt, the monthly PR stunt that Elon Musk does with the Israeli clique, Shapiro and what's the other guy's name? Netanyahu. But it wasn't there. It was, they went to visit the Holocaust memorials in Auschwitz or something like that. Anyways, they're back. And of course, they're back on the border once again. They're all talking about civil war, okay? Now, conveniently, this takes attention away from the following. The International Criminal Court makes an interim decision on Israel this Friday on whether or not they're going to be guilty of genocide. Now, of course, this institution is toothless. Whether they're deemed guilty or not guilty, it's not going to matter. It's a symbolic win, I suppose, if you're of that persuasion that thinks they are, in fact, committing something. I think it's a bit of a red herring to call it something. I think this is semantics. There's a lot of people dying. The question of whether or not it constitutes genocide, is that even really the question to be asking at this point in time? Maybe there's a reason why it's being framed that way. Anyways, that's neither here nor there, because that, quite frankly, is the least of what's going on. The big thing that's going on is that right now the U.S. government is loading the boats with weapons. Israel today just signed a deal. They're going to be getting 25 F-35s, 25 F-15s, thousands of machine guns, millions of rounds of ammunition, 16 Apache helicopters, and a whole lot of other stuff. Right now, the Civil Air Reserve that I talked about being activated a few weeks ago, now we know why, because they are loading Israel to the nines with weaponry. If somebody, lights a cigarette in that country, the place is going to explode. There is so much ordnance in there right now. They're also sending weapons, of course, to Poland and to North Korea, not North Korea, who knows? I mean, this day and age, if they're playing both sides of the fence. Well, they're sending it to South Korea and Taiwan. The other things that are happening right now, in addition to the Israelis notifying all of their embassies within the region that they need to make sure that they have generators, they need to make sure they have fuel, stockpiling provisions, they're putting their hospitals on high alert. They've moved 80 more doctors and nurses into that region doing mass casualty drills, stockpiling provisions. That's what's going on in that neck of the woods. And now the U.S. is waffling on whether or not they're going to be pulling out of Iraq and even Syria. This would be a sign that they're getting ready to redeploy those troops somewhere else. Now, they actually just reinforce troops in Syria. I think this may be some kind of extraction team to help them get out of Dodge before things really get fired up, all right? Because there doesn't seem to be any possibility that Lebanon and Israel are going to be able to work this out, because there is no negotiation happening at this point in time. And Israel has also added to the amount of month-end ultimatums by saying that if we can't get a deal by month's end, the probability that they're going to go to war with Lebanon is extremely high. Now, more importantly, the situation that's going on in Ukraine and Russia. Here's what's going down. Vladimir Putin made a spontaneous trip to Kaliningrad. I think this was one of the first since the beginning of the war. Don't quote me on that. It's the first I've heard of that he's went there. Of course, this means that he needs to cross enemy lines from their point of view. They need to cross that Suwalki corridor. I'm not sure where they flew from. I presume maybe Belarus. No, I guess they wouldn't have done that, would they? They probably would have had to flow around the Baltic Sea. Anyways, they were being tailed the entire time by 8 NATO fighter jets. So there's 3 reasons I think that Putin went to the exclave of Kaliningrad that is currently, right now as we speak, surrounded by hundreds of thousands of NATO troops. People talk about the 90,000 troops that are currently stationed there, plus, of course, all the support staff, which brings that number probably up to about 100, 110,000. You also have the Polish military. You also have the Baltic Sea fleets of warships, NATO warships. You have the countries that are just across the Baltic. You have the Lithuanians. So you add all that up, it's in the hundreds of thousands of troops that are currently surrounding this exclave at a very critical juncture in the war. If I've not beaten this horse to death yet, I'm going to probably have to do it again, because most people do not realize how intense the situation has become. Now, Vladimir Putin went there for 3 reasons, I do believe. 1, to make sure everybody is on deck before the shit hits the fan. To use that KGB sniffer nose of his to see if there's any defectors in the ranks, and to just make sure everybody is online and ready to go for when it goes down. Number 2, to give reassurance to the people there that Russia is not going to cut them loose and relinquish them just like they did in Kherson or some other parts of the annexed territories that they retreated from, like in and around Kharkov. He's sending a message that we stand with you and that we consider you to be a vital strategic part of Russia. I personally don't think they are. I know they redeployed S-400 missile defense from that region. I presume that they did that in anticipation that they were going to be overwhelmed there, okay, and that they're actually willing to potentially forfeit Kaliningrad. That's a big loss if they actually do lose Kaliningrad. And if a battle ensues in that region, I mean, after that, after the loss of that, they really have fewer cards to play. They're backed up against the wall even further. The likelihood of utilizing the proverbial nuclear weapons are higher than ever, okay, if they aren't already. So, and the 3rd reason he went there was to send NATO a message that they do mean business and to show that he's not scared. Now, they could have blew his plane out of the sky at any time. The fact that they didn't says something. They probably know something about that old dead hand system or whatever sort of nuclear briefcase he had in hand or contingency plan, because I don't think he's making those trips without making sure that that plan is hashed out beforehand. I could tell by his body language when he went there that this wasn't some PR stunt. This was a business trip, okay? He had his business posture going on. All the while, you have a P-8 Poseidon plane surveying the Russian border regions. So what that tells us is very likely that we're going to see more attacks with the Ukrainian bomber drones deep into Russian territory, targeting the oil facilities, the gas facilities, the pipelines, trying to completely destroy Russia's oil infrastructure. And the more you do this, eventually it's going to take its toll. I know there's a lot of people who are adamant that it doesn't matter how many of these bee sting attacks happen, it's never going to kill the bear. But eventually it's going to drive the bear crazy, and he's only going to have one option, and that is going to deploy a nuclear weapon. And this is why their soldiers are currently training for the detonation of nuclear weapons as we speak, with a new type of bomb that exhibits the exact same characteristics as a nuke without the radiation. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a moment. So Operation Steadfast Noon, this next 2 months is going to be so incredibly tense across the European continent because you're having the biggest next NATO exercise ever run. The potential for a Russian offensive is about to kick off. And now the Germans have found a way to get Taurus missiles in the hands of Ukraine. Now, are these going to be a game changer, or are they just going to get shot down like most of what Ukraine shoots into Russia? Of course, they're going for that Kerch Bridge. They're going for those big wins. That's what they want this for. Germany has found a way. They've drafted up a plan now where they're going to give the Taurus missiles to some other, I was going to say something, but I won't, to some other countries like France and the UK, who then have no problem giving the Taurus, handing it over. Because now, who's to blame? We're all to blame. It's actually quite clever because then, even though Germany is saying the intention of this plan up front, so it's not like, Russia is still not going to hold them responsible, but it kind of diffuses the blame a little bit and it puts it in the hands of the French. They're probably going to give them to the UK because the UK gives Ukraine whatever it wants. Now, here's the other problem that is currently happening. The Russians are claiming that the plane that was shot down with, according to them, 60 Ukrainian hostages or POWs, they are saying that this was an act of sabotage initiated by the MI6. And remember, this is the Russians. Don't cancel me yet. Please keep me on at least till the first nuke drops, YouTube, okay, or Skynet, whatever you call yourself, or whatever you are. Just keep me on until then, and then by that time, I think I'm ready to hit the road anyways. So this is what they're saying. They're saying that this was an intentional plan to drive another wedge, because you got to understand, this POW negotiation, there was a line of communication there between the Russians and the Ukrainians. That has been all but severed now. They took down the plane. First, the Ukrainians said, we shot down a plane. Then they walked it back because the Russians said, no, there's a bunch of POWs on there. This was supposed to be a deal. And I'm going to get into the reasons why. There's evidence that the Ukrainians didn't turn on their radars, which signifies that they had help with NATO reconnaissance, could possibly be satellite or some other method that doesn't require Ukrainian radar. So this is why they think NATO actually had a hand in this, okay? So this is big, because what this tells the Russians, it's actually, now that I think about it, it's kind of a catch-22, because it also tells the Russians that maybe there's people within Ukraine that still want to negotiate, but maybe there are elements of the NATO intelligence agencies that are trying to prevent that. Now, I'm not saying any of this is true. I'm just giving you their perspective, because I quite frankly don't know. I'm leaning towards there's something there. I'm not believing pretty much anything that we say anymore, nor do I believe the Russians necessarily. But in my experience, when you have a hegemon and you have an underdog, typically the hegemon lies more. It's just, it's just how it is, right? So this is something to keep in mind. All right, so let's just quickly go into depth about some of these stories here today. So in terms of the border issue, Governor Abbott deployed the National Guard soldiers. He has still today to take down the fences, and there's going to be some potential flashpoint event there. Either way, this is getting all the people riled up and fighting over political issues right in the run-up to political season, which of course is quite convenient because it takes attention away from a lot of things. Are we even going to see an election is the question. Because if they have to declare martial law, if there is some sort of Texit, they're calling it, like Brexit, secession from the Union, then anything is possible. So all I can say is that the war may now materialize here. The problem is, from a national security standpoint, and this is why you're trying to have the Sarah Ashton Cerullios down here to associate with the Russians and the Chinese and try to pretend like this is all being orchestrated by the Russians, which is just idiotic. But of course, it's a clown show, right? And you got to keep the circus going. But what could potentially happen as a result of this is now they're going to try to merge all these issues together. They want to bundle it all together. Want to get as much military funding as possible for our foreign escapades, but we also want to ensure the border security. So I almost think, like, I don't think that politicians think this far ahead and are this smart and are this good of chess players, but if Biden was smart, he actually would be trying to create some civil unrest around this issue so they could implement some sort of Marshall framework and initiate or incite more extremism in the run-up to the election. This could potentially create enough chaos they need to either sway the vote in the other direction, which seems like Trump has all the momentum right now, but that's what a lot of people thought in 2020 as well, and it didn't turn out that way. So you just never know. But I would just be very careful about getting yourself involved in any of this. I mean, go and vote, but I would be very careful about getting caught up in any sort of mob, because I'm pretty sure we're only in January, okay? They're making movies about this. Recall, Don't Leave the World Behind was all about the civil conflict. Now they're making a movie called Civil War. What do you think is going to happen here? You guys are probably wondering, why is this playing in a loop in the background? I bought these TVs. This is a temporary setup because we're building a huge new studio, like top of the line. This is why I don't want to get canceled until the nukes fly. I'm trying to do the best I can here for you guys until that time happens. But I picked up these TVs. They were like 130 bucks. Now, 130 bucks, how many groceries can you get for 130 bucks nowadays? I used to say to myself, when a week's worth of groceries was more expensive than a television set, that's when we were pretty much close to the end. And this is probably 3 days worth of food. Anyways, this lineup that you're seeing here is a Canadian government office, okay? This is Service Canada. This isn't like the Social Services Welfare Office. This is where you go if you want to get a passport or if you want to get employment insurance, okay? If you actually worked all your life and you hurt yourself or something and you need to get some money back from the government, you have to stand in a line, and I shit you not, these lines take about 8 hours. And at 9 a.m., this was first thing in the morning, people had camped out overnight already. You got people in chairs. People get people to hold their place in line. It is terrible. And it's not like this issue just came up. This has been going on for years. Okay? Now, the point I'm trying to convey here is, this is how our government functions in the best of times. When we have grid, when we have running water, when we have online services, artificial intelligence, supercomputers, they can't fucking figure out how to hire a few more people with the tax money that they leech off everybody, that people have to stand in line for a day and a half, 2-3 days in some cases in the bigger cities. I live in a small city, okay? So imagine what it's going to be like when the shit hits the fan. Imagine the chaos. You're not going to see lineups like this, because before people are willing to stand in food lines, they're going to be burning down whatever place they're standing in front of. Mark my words, I just got that video yesterday. So go on down to Market Mall if you want to see for yourself what is going on there, okay? As I talked about with the Russian plane shoot down, and this is something that's you got to pay attention to. The Ilyushin 76 shoot down on the border with Ukraine and Russia that was intended, according to the Russians, to deliver these POWs, has cast doubt on the possibility of continued Russian-Ukrainian prisoner exchanges, which until this point served as one of the last major channels of communication and cooperation between Moscow and Kiev. Well, how convenient if you want to continue the war. And this is what the Russians are saying. The British, that they are the ones who are culpable for this, according to the Russians, are burning all the bridges so that Ukraine has no chance of conducting any negotiations. Now get a load of this story. I think they're just telling this to people for hopium, but Ukraine to start building 4 new nuclear reactors this year. This is from Reuters. And every single story that I tell you today, go and fact check it. People think I'm playing a game of what if here. It's not what if, it is when, okay? It's just a matter of time. Use every moment that you have right now to prepare. I like to joke around for my own mental sanity, but this is not a joke, okay? Things could pop off literally any minute. We are teetering on the brink. They want to build 4 new nuclear reactors. Number one, this is going to take a long time. Number two, it's in a war zone, so who the hell in their right mind is going to invest in this? They're saying it's going to go into the west of Ukraine. Number three is, what if Ukraine is already refining uranium, or they already have a nuclear weapon, and this is why the Russians haven't used a nuclear weapon yet? I mean, they have some of the biggest nuclear reactors. They had up until the Russians took it over, biggest nuclear reactor in NATO. You're telling me that they couldn't have found a way to do something in one of the many Cold War era subterranean, cavernous, deep underground military bunkers? You're telling me that? I don't know. Something's weird with this nuclear reactor business, and just the talks of drawing this war out for years and years, and the talks say, yeah, we're going to get them 1 million shells in 2 years. 2 years is how long they're going to take to get the shells. You don't think that they're going to do some stupid shit in between now and then to try to bring us into this conflict? Guys, I am very worried right now. I'm really worried. I'm genuine. Like I'm trying to have some levity with this conversation, and I'm trying to appease people's fears. I know that sounds crazy because knowledge is power. Knowledge can give you some insight, but the stage is set. I mean, if you ever wanted to launch some kind of invasion around Kaliningrad, this is the time to do it, okay? This is the time where everything could just pop off. I've explained all the different dimensions in my video yesterday where I talked about what the motivations for Ukraine targeting Russian oil fields might be. And did you notice that the price of oil is starting to go up very slowly but surely? Brent crude is now holding strong over $80, which hasn't been the case for the last couple months, I think. So this tells us that things are, that peacetime, that relative plateau of stability is coming to an end, and we're about to go on a steep incline once again. So this Israel situation is getting out of control. Germany, of course, drafting that plan with the UK. They're just going to give them to somebody else to give them to Ukraine. Once they do that, Ukraine's going to try to take out the Kerch Bridge. If they are successful, I don't know. I mean, all bets are off at that point. There has to be something done, because these bombing runs, I'm sure they're taking their toll. I'm sure the manpower of the Ukrainians is diminishing. We see day after day that their conscription efforts are struggling, and it's becoming harder and harder to call it a democracy with a straight face by any person who's arguing in good faith. So the only potential saving grace, and I don't say this from a place of preference, is that maybe the Russians are still definitively having the upper hand in this battle, and it's still their fight to lose, which I think it is. But, you poke the bear in enough ways, eventually it takes its toll, right? Now, what else do we need to talk about? The North Korean situation. Oh, before I forget, get a load of this. I talked about this in my electric car critique, and I'm a fan of electric cars. I think they have all kinds of benefits for SHTF, but California is pondering a law. Of course, you're only going to do this in California, where they can limit cars to 10 kilometers or 10 miles over the speed limit. Can you believe that? And they're going to be able to do it. And this is why the electric car is probably one of the biggest honey traps, even though it's one of the most amazing rocket ship devices. Like, you got to try a Tesla, and with the self-driving, it's out of this world. But that's the problem. Will you take the bait, I guess, is the question. Did you know, just another factoid, the Boring Company, Elon Musk company, is like doubling its revenue every year. In fact, from the year, 2019 to 2022, they nearly quintupled their revenue, it looks like. So what this tells me, I don't know how this business is profitable, but they're drilling somewhere. Somebody's drilling somewhere. Somebody's drilling someone. That's for sure. Probably happen. I'm guessing there's about 100 million instances of somebody drilling someone right now on the planet. Sorry, again, levity, it makes the medicine go down, right? North Korea. Kim Jong-un's recent activities has raised speculation in Washington about possible war preparations. What this means is that Washington is very likely trying to plan a provocation. Now, the arrogance of us to think that we can defeat the North Koreans, I'm not going to go over this again. Typically, I don't put a lot of stock in what the State Department says, but in the last couple of years, they've been incredibly prescient and transparent, I must say, especially with that Russia situation where they were forecasting it 2 or 3 months in advance. I'm starting to think that they're telling the truth. But of course, it's not so much that what they're saying is incorrect, it's the why behind it. Why would North Korea actually attack? Now, because the North Koreans have nothing better to do, their underground tunnels and networks are probably beyond our comprehension. And to think that you're just going to drop a bunch of nukes and you're going to be able to spare South Korea the fallout, and that the North Koreans aren't going to come up over the South Korean border under tunnels of their own or who knows what, or swim around in submarines or something, shit's going to go down. The US is going to lose aircraft carriers. China's going to get involved. It's all going to happen around the same time. And as soon as one domino falls around the world, they're all going to start to fall. Every DEFCON plane gets up the air. We go to cocked pistol. DEFCON 2, we are ready to go. Whenever one of these theaters, whether it's Lebanon, whether it's Kaliningrad, whether it's Taiwan and China, which of course is heating up, my friends, please take this shit seriously. I know we're beating a dead horse day after day, but I've laid it all out there for you in plain English that anybody can understand. Anyways, some people say that Kim's behavior in this instance is focused more on supporting Russia and Iran to take attention away. And while that might be the case, I can't see him necessarily putting his country's own sovereignty at risk for the sake of the Russians. Yes, they're going to trade ammo for food, but I think beyond that, that's about it. So I think that's all I have to talk about today. Oh, with respect to this Russian nuclear simulator. So I, in error, reported in the last couple of days that this was a virtual simulator. It turns out this is a real bomb, okay? This is a real bomb, which is supposed to, it's derived from the father of all bombs. Similar in size, only this one has a, what does it have? It has like a similar blast wave. It has a similar flash of light as a nuclear bomb. And it has everything essentially on a smaller scale, of course, minus the radiation. So they're training soldiers to prepare to use tactical nukes on the battlefield. And once you open up Pandora's box, once you open up that can of worms and you normalize the use of tactical nuclear weapons, I could foresee a world where you're sitting at home and watching the news on your phone or on the television set at night, and they just flippantly state that Russia detonated another tactical nuclear weapon today. And it just becomes commonplace. Because unless we are willing to go to the extent to arm Ukraine with any of our best weapons, well, at the same time they're asking for stuff, we're sending stuff to Israel. They have a blank check. Ukraine's looking like, what the hell, we're sacrificing hundreds of thousands of our countrymen. Meanwhile, these guys are getting all the stuff. How much sense does that make unless they're going to war, of course, which they are? Then it is very likely that, you know, maybe we ain't going to strike back. I still think that they might find a way to get entangled in there. They're going to have to at some point. They seem to desperately want to hold on to some part of Ukraine for reasons I just can't understand. I mean, if this was about strategy, I get it. But how far are you willing to go? I guess you just want that buffer zone between you and Russia and Ukraine for some reason. Is it because it's a landscape that is rich in natural resources, the best soils in the world, now 25% of which are all contaminated by the depleted uranium and all the lead and all the, you know, just the ammunition and the mines and all the crap that's been going on there. Nonetheless, still the most fertile land in the world. Another thing to think about, and this is the last thing I'll say, is that Russia being taken offline, both for energy and food exports, is an interesting way to, if you were, and I'm not one of these people who thinks that we're going to have a artificially induced Malthusian catastrophe in order to control population. I don't really necessarily buy that. I think our population is going to, if you were of that thinking where you're wanting a depopulation on the planet to minimize carbon footprint, I don't think that we need any sort of artificial introduction. We might need to speed it up, but we are unbreeding ourselves out of existence. Okay, it's only a matter of time. If you look at the population pyramids of developed worlds, that's Peter Zion's forte. I don't agree with him on everything, but I certainly agree with him on that. So something to think about, that it's a great way to take all that Russian wheat that supplies pretty much damn near a third of the planet with wheat and nutritional needs. You take all that oil and gas, somebody is getting really, really fat and rich. And it might just be the American farmer and the American oil rigger and natural gas miner. Guys, that's all I got for you today. Thanks for watching. Canadian Brother out.